I think that goes to really what we should be talking about in this final segment, that, on paper, USC should win, and it should win with some degree of comfort. But are we confident? Are we confident that this team is going to live up to what we see on paper? Athlete by athlete, dude by dude, USC has more than Nebraska does, but is it actually going to manifest itself? And I'm not so much asking for a game prediction. It's more about just your level of trust in Lincoln Riley and the program at this point, because I think that's really kind of the conversation we should be having right now. Crash first, and then Ethan second on this particular point.
So I think with just the program in general, it's hard to gauge what I feel like where you are, because it seems like things will just start off really strong. You're thinking, oh, great, this is our year. It's going to be it. And I mean, in 2022, Riley's first year, that was really that was the case. I mean, yes, they had, the 3 losses, the 2 heartbreakers to Utah, and then the collapse against Tulane in the Cotton Bowl. But that year, you can say that was a good year. You were excited about games. You felt good going into them. Yes, sure, the defense started to struggle and, became a problem. But at least you were winning games, and for the most part, you were just really, the big thing was you were walking out of the stadium with a win. But since then, it's just been you just don't know. Since kind of the second half of 2023, you just don't know what way the game is going to go. And I think for fans, it's been pretty frustrating, because it's I'm not saying you want to, I'm not saying you're not, obviously you got to go earn it on the field. I'm all for that. But it's you don't always want to be showing up to games being what's going to happen? Here we go again. Just fully just having, take a bunch of anxiety medication before or whatever, you do to, brace yourself for those types of things, if that's what you do. But since kind of, the move to the Big Ten, it's just been but since then it's just been kind of just steadily declining each year. So I'm wondering, with this game, is USC there? I mean, obviously when you go cover practices, especially in the spring, everyone's all positive, you feel good. And I mean, especially when you're covering, it's there's not much really out there in terms of footage. They didn't even have a spring game this year. There's not much really you can really analyze that can give you much of an indicator of where the team's at. You really kind of have to go by what you're hearing when you're covering. But I think it's really just with this now, I'm curious, where is USC? Because it seems like Lincoln Riley, I mean, a lot of times he can say the right things sometimes. I mean, sometimes he also doesn't, but he says all the right things sometimes. And I think that does, give people that sense of encouragement. It's all right, we're feeling good. Then we actually get to the games. Then we're wait, what's going on? So I'm just wondering, is this going to just kind of turn out into some of those other programs that we've seen kind of just collapse and then have ultimately, I'm not saying he's going to get fired, but I'm just wondering, is it going to be where it seems like he loses the locker room and then just guys aren't motivated or just whatever, and then ultimately, I mean, it has just led to the coach getting pushed down. I mean, the most notable examples this year are James Franklin, Penn State, Billy Napier at Florida State, and the latest addition to the list, Brian Kelly at LSU. So I'm just wondering, even if Lincoln Riley doesn't get fired, which it doesn't seem like at the moment, could something like that happen because of just what's been going on, just with the results and kind of how USC kind of plays just very streaky, and then just sometimes just kind of not always so confident because of just sometimes the plays that are called and just how just the games kind of go, even whether it's a win or a loss.
So I'm not confident. And I wish I was. And I love Greengrass in the chat because he keeps saying, chill out, guys. You're going to win by 3 touchdowns. And, on paper, Greengrass, I agree with you. This is a team that has the talent to beat Nebraska by 3 touchdowns. And, on the offensive and the defensive side of the ball. And there's a very clear strategic path forward for this team to go and do that. So, as a fan who I'm sure watched USC play Notre Dame a couple weeks ago and saw all the talent on that team, and who watches probably a good bit of USC football other than that, it seems like I can see how you would come to that conclusion. But we just have to remember that USC lost to Maryland last year in Maryland, and it was their only conference win. There's no world in which USC was a worse team than Maryland last year. And, last year they had more holes on the roster, and they didn't have, Miller Moss played kind of below expectations, and Maava wasn't ready to start. But they lost. They still had a lot of talent on that roster, and they lost to Maryland. Like, there's really nothing is impossible for this team in the wrong direction, unfortunately. And Jeff said in the chat also that he would be confident if, USC was playing this game at home. And I agree. I think, I confidently predicted 2-score win in this game if USC was playing at the Coliseum, but they're not. And they're playing in a stadium that's going to be full. They've smartly, I think this is really smart by Nebraska. They decided months ago that they were going to make this game the blackout, and that they were going to make, their special jersey game, and, that they were going to give just fans extra incentive to be really rowdy and be really excited, because that's going to make a difference, because this team can't seem to pull it together on the road against teams that are much worse than them. It's not Notre Dame is not the problem. Like, yes, the Notre Dame loss is disappointing. Yes, we always want to win that game in a big rivalry game, especially when Notre Dame is making as many mistakes as they are. But the problem is Illinois, because, folks, Illinois is not a good football team. They just got very thoroughly dominated by Washington in Seattle. They're not good. They have 3 conference losses. And again, like this game, there was very clear and obvious reasons why we should have gone in and won that game. The Illinois offensive line is not good. Luke Altmaier can't really run the football. Like, the Illinois defense had just had 60 put up on them by Indiana. Like, there are obvious holes on that roster. And, you can throw out, food poisoning, and like there are other excuses that you could make. But the fact of the matter is that, even with all of that happening, USC had the talent to win that game, and they couldn't get it done. And a lot of it was coaching issues. And, and so that's why I'm not confident now. With all of that said, I would love to be proven wrong. I would love for this to be the game that Lincoln Riley finally changes the narrative, that Danton Lynn changes the narrative, that this whole team changes the narrative, that they go in and they take Nebraska's fans out of it early, and, they play 4 quarters of dominant football. And, all of those perceived strengths that I see USC having on paper, they all play out. Like, I would love to see that. And, if that happens, I will give USC plenty of credit, because I think that it's not like, it's easy to win on the road in college football, and it's easy to go win in Lincoln, Nebraska. And it's not like, this is a Scott Frost-led Nebraska team. Like, yes, they're better. Yes, they have obvious strengths. I've laid some of those out. They have a good secondary. They have a great special teams. But it's still, like I said, there's still very obvious weaknesses. And so it's not like I'm saying that it should be easy to go win this game. What I am saying is USC has the talent to do it, and it's very clear. And USC needs to be able to do hard things. And that's the thing, is that USC will, and they need to take care of the teams that are good but not great. And that's what they haven't done the past couple of years. They've had a couple of real clunkers, like against Maryland. But, the majority of the games that have been the really frustrating losses have been the Minnesotas and, of the world, and all of those teams. So Nebraska this year is kind of like a Minnesota last year. Like, it's going to be hostile, and it's at a point in the season where USC has a lot of pressure on them. Nebraska's kind of playing with house money because they already made a bowl, and that's, worth celebrating in Lincoln. And, they probably have another 2 wins on their schedule. So it's going to be another improvement for Matt Rule. Like, it's not as if if they lose this game, it's not as if, the season is lost and everyone's going to, want Matt Rule to be fired. And, the bar is on the floor for Nebraska. So as long as they win a couple more games, they're going to be fine. So they're kind of playing with house money at this point. They don't have all this pressure on them. USC has all the pressure on them if they want to perform up to the program standard and compete for the playoff to win this football game. So, and to change the narrative, like I said. So they need to go and handle business.
All right. Predictions just around the corner. But before that, give me a player or two you're really looking at as someone on USC you really are counting on to step up or to handle a particular matchup, assignment, responsibility in this very important road game. Just 1 or 2 Trojans that you're really looking to as, hey, I need you to be a dude. I need you to step up. I need you to, rise up in this nationally televised game in this important moment for the Trojans. Like, who becomes a leader by example? Who steps into that limelight and really takes charge of this game? Who's someone that you're pinpointing? Crash first, Ethan second.
I think I really would see someone on the really kind of, I guess, I'm going to cheat a little bit, Matt, and just say kind of I really want to see just the defensive line as a whole step up. But if you had to make me pick someone, I'd like to see Braylon Shelby step up and really just, have a dominant game, just because of just how crucial I think it is to shutting down Dylan Raiola early on. I think just the whole line is just crucial. But I think Braylon Shelby, if I'm going to have to be stuck with one or two, I'm going to highlight him because I think he's a leader on this team. He's been around the program for a while, and he's played in some big games and has won some of them. So I think he's got to be the one who's got to step up to his fellow linemen and say, guys, we got to shut this guy down. It's on us to do our jobs and get this and just start this game off and just really rattle them early and make them uncomfortable, especially since we're going into their stadium. So I think Braylon Shelby and the defensive line are kind of the key players I'm looking at to really make sure USC has a shot at winning this game.
Well, I want to give Slap Happy a lot of the credit because he said Makai Lemon's name about 6 times in the chat in a row. And that's kind of the line I was thinking. I'm going to do, like it says on a lot of depth charts and do the or. So I would say Makai Lemon or Jacoby Lane. I'll take either one of them. Just one of them needs to rebound from last week. And, there's been a lot of chatter on Twitter. And yes, Makai Lemon still had 75 yards or something like that. But from what we're used to from Makai Lemon, it was still a down game. He did still get locked up. And he obviously had that one big mistake on the fumble. So yes, it's not like he was held to no catches or 2 catches for 10 yards or something like that. But by his standards, it was a down game. So I want to see him rebound. I also want to see, and if not him, then Jacoby Lane. Jacoby Lane was getting open last week, but he was dropping the football a lot. So if one of them can clean that up, if Makai Lemon can be dominant and kind of, assert himself against the secondary and, because Mayava's going to need open receivers. That's what's going to make him comfortable in this environment. He's going to need somebody who he can count on to consistently get open. And if, things start to get stressful, he can have his number one guy. So I don't think it has to be either one of them specifically. Like I would take either one, but one of the two. I think Makai Lemon is especially would be really great to see. And then, it's kind of an interesting pick. It's kind of an out there pick, but I'm going to take Killian O'Connor because it looks like he's going to play. It's going to be a really loud environment and he's going to be probably knocking off a little bit of rust and he needs to be in sync with Mayava. He needs to, kind of be a leader on that offensive line, help them communicate well with so much noise and just, keep that entire offense's communication flowing really well. So, and I have a lot of confidence in Killian O'Connor. He played well before he got hurt. So it's not as though I'm calling him out because I feel like he played poorly. I just think that if he plays really well and doesn't have any rust, that could be really to USC's benefit.
Yeah, I did say earlier it's a defensive line game, but I do have to say, and Jeff Rodriguez is really pounding home this point, and I agree with him. This is not a player. This is a coach. Rob Ryan. We're at the end of our show, so we can't really go into a full-length discourse on Rob Ryan, but it's certainly worth mentioning that this defensive coaching staff at USC, with Danton Lynn as coordinator, Eric Henderson, woof woof, on the defensive line, and Doug Belk in the secondary, they all worked really well with Matt Entz and provided a really good product. And just relative to what USC had last year, that defense performed really well. The depth became an issue when Eric Gentry and Anthony Lucas went down, but relative to what USC was working with, that staff did a really good job, if not an excellent job. Certainly at least a B+, if not an A- last season. And with Rob Ryan, for all the experience that he has, this defense has not been as good as last year's relative to the talent, relative to, the groceries that USC's been able to pull in at the store. It's been a step backward for this defense. And one has to ask, is Rob Ryan the piece of this puzzle that really isn't fitting? Because Matt Entz did a better job with the linebackers, at least to this point. Now, we have 5 games left of season. We have 5 games of runway still to go before we call it a a season in 2025. Rob Ryan is my pick for this game and really for the month of November. Like, he has to earn his place on this staff. So I really agree with what Jeff Rodriguez is getting at. If we don't see significant, not just performance from the linebackers, but also just the continuity between the front four and the linebackers, especially in run support. If that really doesn't emerge on a higher level against Nebraska, and if it doesn't remain part of the formula for this team in November, like, Rob Ryan's got to go. Rob Ryan cannot be retained for 2026. So no final verdicts here. But like this, Rob Ryan should be coaching for his job. He should be on the hot seat entering November. So really, really agree with Jeff Rodriguez, which we usually do here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. All right, end of the line, folks. Prediction time. And just to kind of set the scene here, USC a 6-point favorite. Let's remind everybody, USC was a 6.5-point favorite against Illinois. We all know how that one turned out. And the Notre Dame game, USC was a 9.5-point dog. Notre Dame wins by 10 and covers. So, like, if you've been betting against USC, you have usually cashed tickets this season relative to the spread. Now, USC covered against Michigan, of course, but usually, like, USC was favored by 17.5 against Michigan State, won by 14. USC was favored by 20.5 against Purdue, won by 13. So, USC has not been covering spreads, and I know we don't focus on covering spreads. Like, again, give me the ugliest 17-16 win. I'll take it, especially if no one gets injured. But USC minus the 6 against Nebraska. Let's give a prediction relative to the spread and, of course, money line as well. Crash first, Ethan second.
So, Matt, I think it's going to be I'm thinking about 20s. I got this one. I think USC is going to find a way to squeak it out, but I think it's going to be just kind of I don't want to say ugly, but it's going to just be, down to the wire, last possession, just really just gritty game. So I think USC is going to win this one. Going 24-23, I think, is about where it's going to be. So that's kind of where I'm feeling. I don't think the Trojans cover, especially just with how they've been. So I'm thinking it's going to be, kind of mid-20s. It's just something that's just, going to just be really back and forth. Just kind of a street fight. Just really, I think it's going to be an interesting game, but I'm just not sure. I think USC finds a way to win. I'm confident in that, but I'm not confident in their ability to cover the spread.
So I really like Bob's prediction, 34-28. I was thinking 34-27, so we're kind of really aligned here. I don't think it's going to be the kind of 34-27 where USC has to go down and score a game-winning touchdown. I think it's going to be more like, USC's leading pretty consistently, but they're just not putting Nebraska away, because I feel like that's what we've seen a lot of from this team. So, it's going to be like Nebraska kicking a field goal with a minute and a half left in the game to cut the lead to 7, and then, trying to do the onside kick and not doing it successfully. Like, that's kind of what I'm thinking, that sort of 34-27. Like, I think, it'll be just close enough the whole game for us all to be way more stressed out than we should be, but, not quite close enough that, we're really ever in, a super big doubt about this game. So that I'm thinking 34-27. I think it's going to be a little bit more high scoring than Crash does, just because I don't really I think that, USC is, with the balanced offense that they have, with the offensive line that they have, I think that they're going to find a way to put points on the board. I just worry that, and I think I have the right to, that, this defensive game plan is not going to be great, and that we're going to let Emmett Johnson run all over us. So until I see that taken care of, I'm going to be nervous about it. So that's why I think, Nebraska is also going to be able to put up points. But, I think 34-27 somewhat comfortably is a pretty fair and safe prediction for how this USC team and this Nebraska team have fared in the past.
Yeah, so, I don't have a lot of confidence in USC, but I don't think Nebraska is especially good. Like, I can't take Nebraska outright, so I'm going to take USC to win. But I'm definitely taking Nebraska plus the 6. Like, again, if you've been betting against USC on the spread, you've been cashing far more often than not this season. So you got to ride that, and you got to just say, Lincoln Riley, Danton Lynn, prove it. Rob Ryan too. Prove it. Prove it. You can go into enemy Big Ten territory at night. You can just, put the boot to the throat. We'd love to see that, but the fact that this just doesn't happen is why it's hard to trust that is going to be the outcome. So I do think that USC scores. Nebraska's going to score plenty, to keep the game within reach. Give me USC 34, Nebraska 31. Taking Nebraska plus the 6, but USC comes out with the victory. All right, so because there's a game, we have a Sunday show this coming Sunday, November 2nd, 5 p.m. in LA, and the rest of the West, 8 p.m. In the East. And then, of course, next week we have our regular Tuesday show. And, next week it's Northwestern on a Friday night. Won't be competing with a Dodger World Series game this time. Last year it was the Rutgers game starting right when Freddie Freeman did his thing against the Yankees. But so no World Series conflict this time for a Friday night special. That's going to be against Northwestern. But we'll be back here next Tuesday for our Northwestern preview show. But Sunday at 5 in LA, it's our Nebraska review